Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us for this NCFE webinar, Career Map webinar, supporting adults with training for employment. Today, we're going to be discussing the importance of lifelong learning and the impact the pandemic has been having and solutions for supporting those hard to reach adult learners into the next steps. It's really great that you could join us this morning. As I said, I'm from CareermapLive. Hopefully you've signed up to receiving our publications and invites to future webinars. We provide all sorts of information to help people make informed decisions about their future. These content in our magazines and on our website and our webinars all link to any live vacancies as well. So if something is of interest, you can actually apply to start any courses or any job opportunities straight away. As any webinar, I'm sure you've been to many, you'll see on your side of your screen a chat box. In this chat box is where you can put in any questions that you like or comments throughout the presentation. We will be gathering the questions up to be answered in a full Q&A at the end of the presentation and make sure that we cover everything. But of course, if you want to chat amongst yourselves and you want to say hello, feel free to do so. This webinar is being recorded and will be available on CareermapLive. You can follow us on our social media so you can go back to it and have a watch again. You can also do screenshots, and I recommend it if you see any links or other information on the presentation that you would like to go back to. Plus, some links will be dropped into the chat box throughout the presentation too, so you can feel free to open those up in another window to look at now. So if my guests from NCFE could join me. Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Morning.
Right. So this morning we have Dan Howard. Hello, Dan.
Hi.
David Jones.
Morning.
And Michael Lehman. They've
Hi.
got some exciting and really informative stuff for you today. So I'm going to hand over to them. I'll disappear off, but I'll be here. Like I said, make sure you give a shout out, say hello, let us know where you're from. And any questions or comments, like I said, we'll gather up during the session and answer them at the end. So I'm going to hand over to our guests from NCFE and away we go.
Thanks, Sharon. So for those that have not met me before, my name is Dan Howard. I'm Operations Director for Learning for Work at NCFE and also the Managing Director for Skills Forward. And, you know, thank you to Sharon and CareerMap for allowing us to be involved in today's presentation on a topic that is you know, I'm very passionate about, and I know there's some real good information from my colleagues that are joining me today. In terms of today's session, we're going to be looking a bit into lifelong learning and in its context, explaining the current climate of the impact that's having on the education and skills system, and the scale of the challenge that we have ahead of us in terms of supporting people back into employment and the real challenges that are facing adult job seekers at this moment in time. Looking at some of the government initiatives and how we can support adults with training to support them into employment. And it's real good to see the government putting skills at the heart of our economic recovery as we recover from the COVID pandemic. And then talking onto some of the growth sectors that we're seeing at the moment, so a bit of research and insight into that, and what we're doing in terms of tackling regional support as well. We'll summarise all of that at the end. And then open that to question and answer from everyone from today. I'll kick things off in terms of lifelong learning, and as I mentioned, it is something that's I'm really passionate about, and you know, education taken after school for anyone of any age, I think is so important in terms of how people prosper, and not only the social and economic benefits that come from that as a result. For someone who has participated in lifelong learning, myself, I can, you know, talk firsthand of the impact it's had on my own life, as well as those people around me. But I think what we need to recognise that it is so important now more than ever, with the results and the impact from COVID, and the extended periods of lockdown and social isolation and social distancing, that lifelong learning is more critical now than it has ever been. some research recently has kind of suggested that 47% of people don't find their careers fulfilling. And that's really sad in terms of, you spend most of your life at work. We're all working very differently now, and we're all joining remotely, and that is becoming the new normal in what has been a very unnormal year. And I think going forward, we need to make sure that the investment that has been put into work-based learning and how we can help develop people and facilitate growth in the economy as well as socially for people to thrive not only in their careers but within their personal lives. I think from an employer's perspective, getting that motivated workforce, and again, going back to that 47% of people who aren't fulfilled in their careers, making sure that employers are adequately looking at their training and development of their colleagues, succession planning in the most appropriate way, and helping transition people who may, have been in a sector that has really had a difficult time during the pandemic. We've seen sectors that have collapsed or shut down completely, and it's how we can support people to transition maybe from that sector into another sector where we may be seeing growth at this moment in time. So all of that in terms of skills is going to be crucial in terms of supporting people and the economy moving forward. It would be wrong of us not to touch on the current climate and the ongoing impact that coronavirus and the pandemic had on the whole population, not just adults. And I think it's going to be more tangible as we see more job losses, and where I know furlough has been extended, but where we will see the true result and impact of that when the data is analysed and that comes to an end. I think what UK has done, and particularly the education and skills sector in particularly, has demonstrated that level of resilience in terms of how to make changes to their infrastructure and ways of working differently in order to keep businesses running and education mobilised. And I think that isn't to be underestimated in terms of the sheer effort and determination that we've seen British industry put in to make sure that where possible, we can maintain some form of business as usual. We have seen a massive shift towards tech-enabled solutions, particularly, within education as well. Conferences such as this, and I miss conference season. I'm not going to lie. I'm a social butterfly, and there's nothing I like more than seeing people at conferences. But we've had to change. We've had to adapt, and I think we will learn lessons from this, and certainly ways of working. We will find a new normal and come through that, and not underestimating the power that technology has had on our working environments with so many people working from home, if possible. We've got a new tech-enabled workforce that probably weren't there before, and so we need to, pay credit to that and also support that in terms of digital inclusion and making sure people have got the equal access to technology and opportunities as well as training and development. I think there are cohorts of learners at risk who do need more support, and we're seeing that more and more in terms of people who have been made redundant. And if you look at hospitality, if you look at retail, if you look at travel, in particular, those sectors have been absolutely devastated. Headlines in the news just yesterday around large retail organisations going into administration, and that has a catastrophic impact on people's personal lives as well as society and the economy. And it's about how can we as a sector kind of stand up and play our part to support those individuals who are facing uncertainty and making sure that we can support them into employment, but not only as a quick win, but jobs that will be sustainable. The apprenticeship sector, and I know we're talking about adults, and people don't necessarily think apprenticeships are for adults, but we've seen apprenticeship starts decline. And I think, again, looking at the incentives, and we will touch on that throughout today's session, but looking at some of the incentives that have been put in place for apprenticeships, I think is really important as well. And learners that are looking at education and training in order to retrain and upskill should not dismiss an apprenticeship as an opportunity to do so just because of their age. Apprenticeships are open-aged and are for anybody over the age of 16. So I think from an adult's perspective, it's around making sure, if it's the right opportunity for them, embracing apprenticeships where possible as well, because you've got a support mechanism in place for employers and incentives to support them with recruiting apprentices. I also think we need to look at the different geographical guidance that's out there, and also the different demographics of people, because some regions have been hit harder than others. And also we've seen from research that particularly the BAME community have really suffered. And it's about making sure that we've got inclusivity across all of our incentives, across all of the programs that are being delivered, and making sure that any support and guidance that is in place is inclusive of everybody and gives everyone that equal access opportunity. We've seen through research, and again some of the conferences and webinars that I've been on personally, we've seen a significant decline in people's mental health, and again the impact of the lack of social interaction that people have had, and people working from home who may not even live with anybody else. We've seen a deterioration in mental health, and we mustn't underestimate the support that needs to be put in place to help people navigate what are really difficult and uncertain times, both for their mental health, that they're worried about their economic health as well, in terms of the jobs and the labour market. So I think it's crucial that we address that where possible with support, development and skills. I'm proud as an organisation that we've developed qualifications to support mental health, as well as prevention qualifications for suicide as well. And they were launched earlier this year. And I think it's about using those opportunities to have those conversations with people, regular check-ins with people, but also supporting them with their development and training along the way. I think, again, in terms of the current climate, we see the government investing, and again, as I said at the start, it's really encouraging to see the government putting skills at the heart of our recovery, and the investment they're making in training shouldn't be underestimated. I think the schemes and the training programs, we've got Kickstart in terms of supporting people into employment. Yeah, the Chancellor announced last week the Restart scheme. All of these things are put in place to make sure that not only employers are supported, but those individuals who need support to progress into employment have got the support they need as well. I think the overall package is expected to cost over £200 billion. And that is a significant step forward in terms of the government's investment in skills. And, many of us are waiting for the government's white paper, the College of the Future, and other commitments that have been made by the government. But I think this is the start of a long road to recovery, but putting skills at the heart of that, I think, is the right step. I've touched on some of the collapsing sectors already, but we do see sectors that are growing as a result of the different ways of which we're working. A lot more online deliveries. I think, most of my Christmas shopping has been done online. So therefore, we've seen a lot of growth in sectors such as warehousing, distribution, transport, logistics. We've seen a newfound respect for health and our care system, and we've also seen growth in our health and social care system in terms of employment opportunities as well. So again, I think it's about understanding the data, the insight, the research, and analysing what sectors are growing and where, and making sure that we can support people with those core skills, the employability skills, helping them understand their transferable skills, to make sure that people can easily transition from one sector into another. And again, it doesn't matter where anyone is. It doesn't matter how old anybody is. Lifelong learning truly is for everybody, and it's making sure that we're disseminating that information. We're accessing those people through high quality careers advice, guidance, as well as the taking advantage of the government funding that's been put available to people, in order to make sure that we're making it accessible and everyone has the chance to learn and progress into what is a new opportunity from where they are today. I'll now hand over to my colleague Michael, who will take you through the next section of today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dan. And hi, everybody. It's great to be here. Thanks for the opportunity as well. So, as it says on the screen, no organisation alone can solve these problems, and it's really contingent on all of us to work collaboratively, sharing insights and ultimately developing that coordinated response which plays to all of our strengths. Which pieces of the jigsaw can we bring to the table to effectively solve the problem? And to be able to solve that problem, we need to fully understand the problem. Luckily, there are a lot of think tanks, research organisations, and other organisations that bring a lot of insight to the table, I think the difficulty is there's a lot of noise out there, and we really need to get under the skin of actually, what is changing around this labour market. The very shape of the labour market is changing. Certain individuals are more likely to be impacted by that. So I'm going to try and, over the next few slides, unpick some of that and, give everybody some idea of both the scale and, the unique nature of the challenge ahead certainly for adult job seekers. So a few kind of key stats to go through, really. The first one being that the furlough scheme generally, I think, has been heralded as a success in terms of keeping people in an employed status and keeping many businesses going. But actually, what we do know from the first round of evaluation is that around about 1 in 10 people ended up having no job at all to return to. So the good news is about 90% of people overall do. Unfortunately, that stat actually doubles, and actually that goes to around 20%. So 1 in 5 people from Black and minority ethnic communities or Black minority ethnic backgrounds don't have a job to go to, and that's completely unacceptable. And as you can see already, the impact of this is being borne, in widening those disadvantages that already exist out there. A McKinsey study also revealed that on a global scale, women are 1.8 times more likely to lose their jobs due to the pandemic. And there's various other ways that the pandemic is disproportionately affecting deprived communities. So that, I think, those who work, in delivering FE or adult training programs might have seen, certain adults may not have access to, decent internet. They may not have the skills to be able to do that. And that just exacerbates the challenge. Those people are much further away from the labour market. And, in the pandemic, those barriers are being put up in front of them that even further away from being able to secure a job. That 11% stat in the next bullet point there, the economy will have shrunk by about 11% by the end of this year, and that was confirmed by the IFS alongside the budget last week and spending review. That is the biggest drop in GDP in a single year for over 300 years, pretty much since records began there. So you can see that the economic hit has been very, very sudden and sharp, and it's going to take a long time to recover from. In terms of the rise in unemployment, that is rising, and all estimates do indicate that that's going to peak around about Q2, Q3 next year. And that could be, quite a high rate of unemployment as well, at about 7-8%. That's largely driven not by people losing their jobs, but by very few openings for unemployed people. So that creates a chasm between people leaving full-time education. So, a lot of graduates or people studying postgrads even might find it very difficult to re-engage with the labour market, or those who do lose a job will find it much harder to get that. If people who are already long-term unemployed, again, are driven further away from the labour market with that. So, if things go really wrong and we see huge job losses on top of that, then of course that unemployed number would rise. But I think at the moment the concern is getting people into those entry-level jobs, getting people progressing through the workforce, upskilling them in their current roles, getting them through the workforce, which opens up some of those entry-level roles for other people as well. So throwing in on top of this, I'm going to have to bring the B word into this one, but Brexit is very much coming to a head, really. So, we're coming to the end of the transition period at the end of December, and that's going to mean a lot of divergence from current EU rules and regulations, and that's going to, I think, exacerbate some challenges in the labour market, particularly in some sectors. There is a lot of uncertainty about the future trading relationship with the EU. As of yet, there is no confirmed deal, and it could be that we we end up on World Trade Organization terms, and things like new immigration rules are going to play a part. So if you take some of, and this is by no means an exhaustive list of sectors that will be affected, but certainly, these sectors are very, very likely to be affected by the fallout from Brexit. So, transport and logistics, just getting things in and out of the country, that will have a big impact. And we'll have all heard the stories about the M5 in Kent and the big lorry park they're going to have there, but we do expect a lot of delay in borders, and that has a massive knock-on impact onto sectors such as manufacturing, The much vaunted car industry and automobile very much relies on just-in-time delivery of component parts from the EU. If there's big border delays, that will slow down certain sectors, and I think that those sectors are going to have some unique challenges going forward. Agriculture, another one, which is heavily reliant on EU workers, seasonal workers as well, coming over, picking fruit and vegetables, things like that. There's going to be a big skills replacement need there. And again, that's sort of similar in many ways to the challenges that we see in social care. The social care workforce does heavily rely on EU migrants. As those immigration rules change, we might see fewer EU migrants making up that workforce. And, it's often said that we actually do not have enough people in that social care workforce. It feels inevitable that the government will at some point raise the wages of that sector, which I feel would go a long way towards supporting that skills replacement need that we've got there. But there are opportunities generated by some of this as well. As EU workers leave, there will be job openings which, if we are to upskill our domestic potential workforce, we can get people into jobs in that sector. And social care, being a really good example of a sector where the impact of that work is absolutely huge and very much needed in society. And the UK labour market in general has been changing rapidly and will continue to do so for years. So things like automation, changing working practices and things like that. Even the things like the pandemic has done, like for example, I'm delivering this webinar sitting at home right now. That increase in working from home massively changes the shape of the labour market. That has a knock-on impact to the need for food retail, the need for public transport, all of that kind of stuff. So I think we are going to see in over the next 10 or 20 years a very, very big change in the number of jobs in certain industries, certain job roles, and we need to be very cognizant of that and work towards where we believe the growth will be, using labour market information, looking at industrial strategies both at a national and a local level to unpick how is this going to look in the future. What we can't do is aim for the labour market that we had pre-COVID. We need to aim for the labour market that we will have and facilitate people into those jobs, and that of course will mean a lot of retraining needs for a number of adults. So it's therefore vital that we can all pivot to make sure that we are actually preparing learners for the skills that are going to be needed by employers. So, to take a few examples of industries, travel and tourism, hospitality and catering, I've no doubt will come back. Whether those sectors will be as big as they once were is very much open to debate. I think there will be people who worked in those sectors who will be very much looking to retrain in some of the industries where we will see demand, such as health, social care, digital, or some of the other STEM subjects as well. Now, the government, as Dan's already said, have thrown a lot of money at this, and I think one point to make is at some point further down the line, we will need to pay for that either through higher taxation or through austerity. But I think that's something to think about in the future because it's very much needed, the support at the moment. The support, I think it's fair to say, has been very much more on the DWP than DFE side, very much focused on job creation, job retention, and actually what we've seen in the latest spending review was actually a lot of investment in Restart, which is essentially job search. It's helping people to find the jobs that are actually there and to match them up with them. In terms of education, we did see the plan for jobs in the summer, and that included some additional subsidies for apprenticeships and traineeships, and of course the much vaunted Kickstarter program. In terms of apprenticeships, I think there's probably, it's unlikely we're going to see more generous conditions for employers for the forthcoming years in terms of taking on apprentice. The apprenticeship levy is essentially a tax. It's taken from employers whether they like that or not, and the only way they can reclaim that tax is to take on an apprentice. Throw on top of that a £2,000 incentive to actually take on that apprentice. I think that's as generous as things are going to get. One of the issues, I guess, with apprenticeships as a measure here is that we rely on employers to create those opportunities, unlike, for example, fully funding certain qualification activity or giving entitlement to the learner where they can turn up to their local skills provider. we really need that job to be created. An apprenticeship at its heart is a job with training. So I think, we're monitoring that very closely, and we'd encourage all employers where they can, to invest in apprenticeships. And there's various different ages and levels that they can do that. And I think, the subsidies that have been announced so far, it looks like we're not going to get full take up of that. So, it's important that we are making sure that employers are aware of this as much as we can. The National Skills Fund as well is a very interesting one. So we've seen it's 600 million a year, which works out at around about 500 million a year for England. And that was a manifesto promise from the Conservative government. What we've seen in the last year or so is actually part of that funding have now been allocated to pay for things like the Lifeline Skills Guarantee, Flexible Lifelong Loan Entitlement, the digital bootcamp pilots that are going on. So actually that National Skills Fund, I think, may start to morph and become, parts of other policies, really. I'm not sure we're going to actually see a distinct National Skills Fund that does what we might have expected it to do originally. But what has happened in the last few months is the National Retraining Scheme has been very much folded into that. The National Retraining Scheme, in governmental spending terms, was quite a modest amount of money at about 120 million pounds a year. That's now folded into the National Skills Fund. The implication being that we can take that 120 million pound from the total allocation to the Skills Fund. And as I've already said, the Lifetime Skills Guarantee, what we are expecting from that is the government would fund certain learners who don't already hold a level 3 qualification to study and achieve a level 3 qualification. But what they have promised is that they will issue a list of qualifications that are deemed to be high value, which would attract that funding. We're still awaiting that. We'd hoped and thought we might have seen that before Christmas. It's now looking unlikely, and the best intel that we have at the moment is that will appear next year. And flexible lifelong loan entitlement, I believe that's still being worked out as well. But, we've seen lots of iterations of this over years. Lifelong learning accounts, the Liberal Democrats had skills wallets in there. I think this idea of giving learners some kind of commissioning power over their own learning is quite a powerful idea. And it's certainly something that the government seem very, very keen on at the minute. So there's a lot of support out there. I think, some of the difficulty is that support getting through and onto the ground quickly enough. The stuff announced in the summer, I don't think we've seen as much of that spent as we would have liked. So I think we all have a duty to really target learners and make sure that providers, employers, learners are taking the most of the entitlements that are available to them. Ultimately, we all need to understand where the opportunities are going to be and how we can collectively equip them with the tools that they need to train, retrain, and secure a job. I'm now going to hand over to David. Thanks for listening to me, everybody. I'll be around for questions at the end as well.
Thanks, Michael. As both my colleagues, Dan and Michael, mentioned, really pleased to be here to talk about this. So quickly, how are NCFE looking to support adults? So as you may have seen, we've got our Go the Distance offer for adult learners, the key points of which are on the slide. We're determined to play our part in supporting colleagues across the adult education sector to engage these potentially hard to reach adult learners and support them on the next steps. Most of the qualifications on offer via Go the Distance can be funded through the adult education budget, either through the ESFA nationally or via a mayoral combined authority, including the Greater London Authority, obviously. And we understand that not all adults wish to work or undertake learning in the sectors we've highlighted. So Go the Distance is enhanced by the availability of our full adult provision. And that also includes flexibility for colleagues within adult education to enhance their curriculum in line with their current contracts, or to bid for additional funding where the opportunity arises. And we've named the offer as Go the Distance, and this is a message that we're absolutely committed to. We'll be adapting and adding to it as we move forward over the coming months. So taking a look then at growth or priority sectors, and I will start with digital. It's been talked about a lot. Throughout the pandemic, we've seen a massive increase in online shopping, streaming services, working at home, gaming, app development, that type of thing. And Tech UK says that British firms, both large and small, are now realizing that digital skills are crucial to all parts of the business, including setting up websites to sell goods online, improving marketing, for example, potentially optimizing production processes. Both Michael and Dan have mentioned health and social care. There is a need for care and for employment in the care sector. We have an aging population. Going into COVID-19, the health and social care workforce faced concerning shortages, and it's putting unprecedented pressure on people working in health and social care. However, even before the pandemic, staffing was the single biggest challenge for the NHS and social care in England, and it was having a direct impact on patient care and staff experience. According to the Health Foundation, projections show that the NHS faced a workforce shortage of over 115,000 full-time equivalent staff in England this year. So on current trends, the gap will double over the next 5 years. And those projections were based on data which was released up to February 2020 and therefore don't account for the COVID impact. While the NHS is experiencing significant staffing pressure, the issue in social cares are even greater and the outlook is concerning. So one measure of workforce supply gap is the vacancy rate. So that rose from 5.5% in 2012-13 to 7.8% in 2018-19. And it's actually 9.3% in London, which is the region with the highest rate. So the number of vacancies in social care in England is estimated to average at 122,000 at any one time. Looking at the next sector on there, so business and enterprise. As with the financial crash in 2008, an economic shock can be a time when people look to set up their own business. Uber and Airbnb were both started during previous economic downturns. And there are some factors which will contribute to more people starting their own business. I think the first is the rise in unemployment. All manner of people have lost their jobs as a result of the coronavirus crisis. So hundreds of thousands of UK workers have disappeared from the payrolls of British companies since March. For those who've already had a burning ambition to be an entrepreneur, redundancy and a highly competitive job market will likely act as a firm push to encourage them to act on it. And the shift to working from home has given working adults a greater sense of autonomy. Free from commuting and travel, the rise of remote working this year has afforded more people more time. And that time can be used to nurture their ideas around starting their own business, whether that's intended to be a side project to their existing work or an entirely new way of making a living. And the onset of COVID has opened up a large number of new opportunities for would-be entrepreneurs, with social distancing measures in place and lockdowns being introduced and then reintroduced across the country. Both consumers and businesses, as we know, are having to quickly adapt to the new normal or the next normal, whatever you want to call it. Moving on, low carbon. So a new 10-point plan from the UK government aims to deliver a green recovery from the coronavirus pandemic and build towards the net zero emissions target. So as the world looks to recover from the impact of coronavirus on our lives, livelihoods and economies, as part of Building Back Better, the government are looking to invest in making the UK a global leader in green technology. So their plan focuses on increasing ambition in advancing offshore wind, driving the growth of low carbon hydrogen, delivering new and advanced nuclear power, accelerating the shift to zero emissions vehicles, green public transport, cycling and walking, jet zero and green ships, greener buildings, investing in carbon capture, usage and storage, protecting our natural environment, and green finance innovation. So the move to low carbon will probably affect us all during the next number of years. So their 10-point plan will mobilise £12 billion of government investment and potentially 3 times as much again from the private sector to create and support up to 250,000 green jobs. A recent report from the Local Government Association shows that demand for green jobs will rapidly increase as the nation transitions to a net zero economy, and that will help to counter some of the unprecedented job losses due to coronavirus, which are likely to increase further when furlough ends next year. And the new green jobs bonanza, as they call it, across every region in England will help the national economic recovery following the pandemic. Moving on to the next sector, so we have warehousing and distribution, and that's linked to my comment about online shopping. There's been a surge in demand for roles. Since the start of lockdown in March, we've all been shopping a lot more online, and that has seen an increase in people being hired in the sector. Online giant Amazon, it's created 15,000 new full and part-time warehouse and delivery driver jobs across the UK in fulfillment centres where orders are processed and in its logistics network. Meanwhile, delivery company Hermes has created 10,500 jobs, 1,500 full-time staff across its delivery network and head office, and 9,000 freelance couriers. Large goods vehicle drivers are also in demand, according to a recent survey, and this work sector dovetails with many of those mentioned previously. Whether it's taking stock to an Amazon warehouse to be shelved and then put into customer orders, or taking extra deliveries to supermarkets, goods are being moved by road. Those who can build vehicles and repair them are also being sought by employers. We know that all regions and communities have been affected by the pandemic, but not all equally. And that brings me on to my next slide. We've heard a lot over the past 12 months about levelling up the regions. It was a key element of the Conservative Party manifesto and something which is still on the political agenda. We saw the announcement last week in the spending review of the £4 billion Levelling Up Fund. As part of the Levelling Up agenda, the government says it wants to reduce regional disparities in the country. In order to respond to the pandemic, each LEP and combined authority has produced their own coronavirus recovery plan. Taking a quick look, for example, at the West Midlands, their plan is to build on previous success and on the multi-billion pound investment they've already drawn in from the government. And it has the creation and retention of jobs front and centre. They want to keep as many people in work as possible. And for those who fall out, they want to create new jobs and offer retraining opportunities in sectors such as construction, automotive, and creative industries. As well as safeguarding people's work in the short term, they also want to use the opportunity created by coronavirus to reshape the economy over the longer term, thinking about what they can do to become greener and more inclusive. And their plan builds on existing success in the West Midlands and proposes direct support to industry in a number of key areas, helping to drive an economic recovery that will safeguard more than 135,000 jobs and build 35,000 new homes. So it's also expected that the local industrial strategy documents will be updated to reflect the pandemic and its recovery proposals. And it's worth familiarising yourself with those as you work closely with the LEP and combined authorities, particularly when looking at how you map your curriculum to meet the requirements of the Ofsted Education Inspection Framework. Touching quickly on the Regional Recovery and Devolution White Paper, as we know, it's been delayed until next year, likely in the spring or summer. And from listening to various conversations, it seems that there is still a commitment to publishing it, but there are mixed messages now about the content. There have been rumours circulating that it will pull back from new deals and focus instead on the existing combined authorities to work with them on the recovery from coronavirus. We'll no doubt start to hear again in a bit more detail what's going to be contained in there in the new year. Touching on Brexit quickly again, as Michael mentioned, and I think the impact will be felt differently by regions depending on what unemployment in key sectors. So research published recently in the journal Economic Geography shows that the UK's economically weaker regions are far more exposed to Brexit than the most prosperous regions, and as such are more vulnerable to the restructuring required to respond to Brexit. Broadly, the same patterns are now emerging again when considering competitiveness. The UK's economically weaker regions in general face more adverse competitiveness in impacts than the UK's more prosperous regions. And as such, these findings imply that Brexit will directly work against any levelling up agenda if not managed carefully. To finish my slides then, I think the green recovery and digital skills are key for regional recovery across all regions. So that draws me to a close. I'll hand back to Dan.
Thank you, David, and thank you, Michael. I just want to thank everyone and summarise. Really, I think we've spoke to you for quite some time, and I'm conscious I want to leave enough time for questions. But just as a summary from what you've heard today, some sectors are facing difficulty. We see it, we're living it in every day. But there are many growing areas, and the key for which is addressing unemployment and how we can transition people from one sector into another, and giving people the skills they need to secure employment and getting the economy back on track post-COVID. The government is pledging a lot of money to support adult education, and we've highlighted some of their incentives and their commitment to the economic recovery today. And our Go the Distance initiative, is here to support the sector to enable adults to retrain, reskill in what is a changing economic landscape. And training and development isn't just to secure employment or help the economy recover. It does also help you with your mental health and well-being. And we're seeing the commitment to lifelong learning and the impact that training and development is having both on people's personal lives as well as their professional ones. So again, it's about making sure that we're aware of all the schemes and support that is available to support people to get back from where they are now to where they need to be. And that is me wrapping up, and hopefully now we will move on to questions.
Hello, welcome back, everyone. That was a really, really interesting and informative session. Thank you all very much. We've had some really interesting questions come through, I think, as well. Graham asked, does adult learner online courses have the same quality as face-to-face, which is something that's been, I think, moving everybody in the sector.
Yeah, and I think online learning isn't there to replace traditional teaching and learning, and if you think about automation and the Industry 4.0 and the way we're moving to a digitalized world, it's not to replace people. And I think online learning has its place. And is there to facilitate a program. It depends on the program of study. I'm doing my level 7 masters at the moment, and again, lifelong learning always on the radar. I'm doing that online. I'm doing it distance learning, and that suits me because I can do that around my personal commitments, and it's my learning style. I think you have to understand the learning style of your learner and where you're going to gain their interest, their commitment, in order to then gain the knowledge, skills that they need to progress. So I am a fan of online learning. It isn't for everybody, and it certainly isn't there and intended to replace teaching and learning in its traditional setting. Obviously, with social distancing, that's been more difficult this year. We have seen a fall in adult education learners. So during the period since March to July, enrolments from like an FE and schools perspective, enrolments on courses are 50% down compared to the same period last year. Now that will obviously be a natural consequence of colleges closing, people working from home, social distancing, but that still tells me that the other 50% have carried on. There have been people engaging in learning, and online learning has certainly had its place over the last year.
Thank you. Carla asks, what do employers plan to do to bridge the skills gap? Where can some of my adult learners find information on this? I already put a link into the chat for our CareermapLive applications that have lots of information that NCFE has supported and put information in, but I'm sure you have lots of information and resources available too. But the question as well is about the employer's plans, if you've got any kind of insight into that.
I think yeah, I mean, if you want to take it, I was going to talk about LEPs, but if you want to, that's fine.
Yeah, so I'll hand over to you to talk about LEPs. Just a quick one. I mean, I think obviously this will vary from employer to employer. I think some employers are very, very proactive, and particularly the proactive ones tend to work as part of umbrella groups. So organisations such as the CBI, the Federation of Small Businesses, they're understanding, how they can respond to this, how they can work with qualification providers such as ourselves to develop that kind of pipeline of talent in. But I think it is patchy. And I think in certain sectors, some employers really aren't doing too much. They're in survival mode, and I think it's contingent on all of us to work to find those hard to reach employers, to let them know that we can support them, we can help them, to develop that pipeline of talent into their workforce ultimately.
I agree, and I think, just touching on from that, I agree that it depends on the size of the employer, and certainly geography has an impact on that as well. The bit I was going to mention on LEPS is, every local enterprise partnership has an employment and skills agenda. And they are a very good conduit and connector between employment skills and working with employer partners to kind of bridge that gap. Job Centre Pluses, the DWP, there's a lot of kind of support out there for employers, and I think I would recommend any business to look at the employment and skills section of their local enterprise partnership website, speak to their local Job Centre Plus in terms of what's happening and what they can get involved in to support people within their geographical area. And again, the .gov website in terms of all of the different schemes that are available for employers, incentives for employers, particularly around Restart and the government's plan for jobs, etc.
I think we've got time for one more question. There's a lot of support out there for retraining in digital. You did touch on this a bit in your presentation. Not all learners want to work in this area. The question they're asking is, what kind of advice do you give? Because, as I said, this session is being recorded and you can go back and look at the full presentation later. But instead of kind of repeating what you were saying about what the main markets are, what do you say to someone who potentially is looking to work somewhere that isn't one of the main up-and-coming hiring sectors?
I would say digital is not for everybody, and the government have announced a digital entitlement for everybody. So all adults, and that's now open to 16 to 18-year-olds as well. Can be fully funded in terms of essential digital skills, and the digital literacy is changing across the country, and I think even if you don't want to work in a digital sector, having the basic digital skills is going to be fundamental to get employment in any sector. Claiming benefits, a lot of that is now done online. Applying for work is done online. Being able to produce a CV and job search heavily online, that is the way where things are going and have been for some time. When the welfare reform and introduction of universal credit came into play, again, it was an online system. So whilst I agree not everyone wants to work in digital, having those basic digital skills helps you to work in any sector. We touched on it in the presentation, but if you wanted a career in health, for example, you need digital skills to be able to do some of that. If you wanted a job in customer service, you're going to need some form of digital skills to be able to do that. Even HGV drivers, you've got digital tachographs now. So, in terms of managing driving hours regulations and what HGV drivers can do legally in terms of driver's hours, they have a digital tachograph. It's a card. It has to go into a system. It records their breaks and what they have to do by law. So again, it's the digital skills that are contextualized and embedded into different sectors. It doesn't have to be a job in digital. We use digital skills every day across our full economy.
Absolutely, I would 100% agree with that. We definitely have found with the issues and topics and sectors that we cover in CareerMap that we used to talk, and we still do talk about a sector spotlight on IT as a career, but IT actually is 100% a transferable skill now. It's something you need to have for any sort of job, but it doesn't mean you have to be a coder. I mean, there's all different levels of courses that you can take that, just as you quite rightly point out in all those examples, that will give you the basic skills to do your job better without actually being, a high-level computer coder.
If you think about track and trace, I had to show my nan how to download an app so she can track and trace with COVID and the NH. That was a digital skill that she needed to have on her phone to be able to track and trace. she's now got that, but I had to walk her through it, and she's probably now downloaded God knows how many apps doing God knows. But it was the skill she needed.
I think
well,
it's
100%. All these people as well who may, only use their computer to look at the news are now knowing Zoom, and who would have known that was a thing?
I think that's a good point as well, though. It's how we recognize this digital skills that people have that they may not realize that they've got.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, 100%. And like I said, I do think that there's something that's listed as transferable skills, and some of the easiest courses to pick up, and lots are available out there. I'm afraid we've actually run over at this point because there's so much more to talk about, I'm sure. So hopefully we'll have a follow-on session. As I said earlier, if you've missed any of this, don't worry. It's all being recorded and will be available on CareermapLive in a few days. Have a look in the chat box for the links. I've really enjoyed this session. If you all want to say your farewells.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. And thank you for joining today. And thank you, Sharon, for allowing us to be part of this.
Yeah, thank you. It's been a good one.
Thanks very much.
Great. Thank you, everybody who joined us. We really appreciate having you here, and look forward to hopefully seeing you again soon. Until then,
have a great day. Stay safe. Take care.
Have a great day.